Israel had its first king, Saul. At first he was a brave leader, but his disobedience to God caused him to lose the Lord's favor. God decided that Saul would no longer continue as king and that someone else would take his place, a man after God's own heart. The prophet Samuel, who had anointed Saul, was saddened by what had happened, but God had a new plan. Soon he would send him to the house of Jesse in Bethlehem to anoint the next king of Israel. No one knew it yet, but this new chosen one would be a young shepherd, the youngest of Jesse's sons, whose life would forever change the history of his people. In those days in Israel, the prophet Samuel wept for Saul, not because Saul had died, but because God had rejected him as king. Samuel knew that Saul was no longer fulfilling God's will and that his reign was doomed to end. But the voice of the Lord spoke with power and firmness. How long will you mourn for Saul? Get up, fill your horn with oil, and go to Bethlehem, for among the sons of Jesse I have provided myself a king. With fear in his heart, Samuel obeyed, and when he arrived in Bethlehem, the elders came out trembling to meet him, asking in fear, "Is your coming in peace?" And Samuel replied, "I have come in peace to offer a sacrifice to the Lord." He reassured them and invited them to purify themselves and take part in the sacrifice. One by one, the sons of Jesse were presented before Samuel. First came Eliab, tall and strong, who looked as if he were made for a throne, but an inner voice warned Samuel not to be deceived by appearances. God does not choose as man does, he looks at the heart. Abinadab passed by, then Shammah, and so on, until 7 of the brothers, but none of them was the chosen one. Samuel then asked if there was any son left. Jesse remembered the youngest, a boy who was tending sheep in the field. He sent for him, and David appeared with a clear gaze and the fresh air of someone who lives among hills and livestock. When Samuel saw him, he felt the confirmation. That young man was the chosen one. He approached, lifted the horn of oil, and poured it over David's head in the midst of his brothers. From that moment on, a new strength. The Spirit of the Lord rested upon him. Meanwhile, in the palace, Saul was experiencing a terrible emptiness. The Spirit of God had departed from him, and a dark presence tormented him. His worried servants suggested finding someone who could play the harp to soothe his mind whenever anguish overtook him. One of them remembered a young man from Bethlehem, the son of Jesse, who not only played the harp skillfully, but was also brave, prudent, and favored by God. Saul sent for him. David arrived at the palace carrying bread, wine, and a young goat, gifts from his father. When he stood before Saul, the king felt a fondness for him and appointed him as his trusted armor-bearer. Whenever Saul's inner storm broke out, David would take up his harp. The notes would rise in the hall like a fresh breeze. The music would envelop the king and restore his calm. And so, still unaware of the magnitude of his destiny, the young shepherd began his journey in the royal court, carrying in his heart the secret of an anointing and in his hands the power to heal with melodies. The armies faced each other from opposite hills like 2 seas of men. The Philistines had camped at Soko in the territory of Judah and occupied a hill. Opposite them, on the other hill, Saul's forces lined up along the edge of the valley of Elah. Every morning and every evening, a single warrior would cross the enemy line. A giant named Goliath from Gath, clad in iron from head to toe. His bronze helmet and coat of mail gleamed in the sun, his greaves protected his legs, and a javelin rested on his shoulders. He carried a spear whose shaft looked like a weaver's beam, and whose tip was so heavy that only a giant could lift it. A shield-bearer walked ahead of him. With a thunderous voice, Goliath challenged the Israelites. He proposed a single combat to decide the fate of the nations. If anyone defeated him, the Philistines would become servants of Israel. If he won, Israel would serve his people.
Let one of your men fight me. If he defeats me, we will be your slaves. But if I win, you will be ours.
Day after day, for 40 days, his challenge echoed through the valley and chilled the hearts of Saul's men. While this was happening, David, the youngest son of Jesse, alternated between serving the king and tending sheep in Bethlehem. His father, worried about his 3 eldest sons who were at war, asked him to bring food to the camp and find out how they were doing. David got up at dawn, entrusted the flock to a guardian, and set out with roasted grain, bread, and cheese. When he arrived, the battle was about to begin and the war cry shook the air. He left the supplies with the person in charge of the baggage and ran to the front line to ask about his brothers. While he was talking with them, Goliath came out again, repeated his challenge, and David heard it for the first time. He saw how the Israelite soldiers stepped aside in fear. Indignant, David asked what reward there would be for whoever dared to face that Philistine who was insulting the ranks of the living God. They told him that the king would offer riches, his daughter in marriage, and would exempt the victor's family from taxes. His oldest brother, Eliab, rebuked him, accusing him of being nosy and arrogant. David protested naturally and kept asking questions. His words reached Saul's ears, who sent for him. "So, are you the one who will face the giant?" In the royal tent, David appeared before the monarch and said with conviction, "Let no one lose heart because of that man. I, your servant, will go and fight." Saul looked at him skeptically. He saw a boy standing before the veteran from Gath. David then recounted his experience as a shepherd. When a lion or a bear attacked his flock, he would chase after the predator and snatch the lamb from its mouth, and if necessary, he would strike it down until he killed it. With that same faith, he trusted that the Lord would deliver him from the hand of the giant. Saul, moved, told him to go and blessed him. He tried to arm him with his own armor. He put a helmet, a coat of mail, and a sword on him, but David could barely move. He took them off, grabbed his staff, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his pouch, and went out with his sling in hand. From afar, the giant could be seen approaching, his shield-bearer in front of him. When he saw David, young, fair, and with a pleasant face, Goliath mocked him. "Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" And he cursed him by his gods. He promised he would give his flesh to the birds and the beasts. David replied firmly, "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, whom you have offended. Today he will deliver you into my hands. I will defeat you, and all the earth will know that there is a God in Israel. Battles are not won by sword or by spear. The battle belongs to the Lord." The moment arrived. Goliath charged forward with force. David did not wait. He ran toward the battle line, put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, and placed it in his sling. He spun it several times with precision and released it. The stone flew, cutting through the air, struck Goliath in the middle of his forehead, and became embedded. The giant staggered and fell face down. A stunned silence preceded the roar of the men of Israel. David ran, stood over the giant, took the Philistine's sword, drew it, and finished off the warrior by cutting off his head. When they saw their champion lifeless, the Philistines fled in disorder. The Israelites and Judeans pursued them as far as the gates of Gath and Ekron, leaving the valley strewn with fallen enemies. Afterward, they returned and plundered the camp. David took Goliath's head as a trophy to Jerusalem and kept his weapons in his tent. On his return, he was presented to Saul by General Abner. The king, still astonished, asked him who his father was. David answered simply, holding the giant's head, "I am the son of your servant Jesse from Bethlehem." Thus began the legend of the young shepherd who, armed with faith and a stone, changed the destiny of his people. After the victory over Goliath, David was brought before the king with the giant's head still in his hand. That encounter changed not only Saul's perception but also the life of his son Jonathan. As David spoke, Jonathan felt their souls become intertwined. He admired in the young shepherd the courage, faith, and humility that he himself longed for. They sealed a pact of friendship that would go beyond blood. Jonathan took off his cloak, his princely garments, his sword, his bow, and his belt, and gave them to David, symbolizing that they shared destiny and trust. From that day on, David never returned to his father's house. Saul kept him, sending him on campaigns and missions where he always showed prudence and success. The people and the king's servants appreciated him, and Saul promoted him to military chief. Sometime later, when the troops returned from the field, joy broke out in the cities of Israel. The women came out to greet the king with tambourines, dances, and songs. Their songs spread like a blazing rumor. They celebrated Saul for his thousands of defeated enemies, but David was praised for tens of thousands. Those words set Saul's heart ablaze with bitter resentment. He thought that the only thing left for the young man was to take the throne. From that moment on, his gaze toward David was colored by envy. The next day, a dark disturbance took hold of Saul. He wandered around the house rambling with a spear in his hand. As before, David took the harp and began to play to calm him. Suddenly, Saul threw the spear, trying to pin him to the wall. David dodged the weapon twice. Saul realized that God was with David, and his own distance from the divine filled him with fear. Trying to keep him away, he appointed him as the leader of a contingent and kept him far from the palace. But the more David went out, the more successful he became. His prudence and divine favor caused Israel and Judah to love him, which increased the king's fear. Seeking to set a trap, Saul promised his eldest daughter Merab in exchange for David continuing to fight against the enemies. Inwardly, he hoped that David would fall at the hands of the Philistines. David wondered who he was to become the king's son-in-law. When the wedding day arrived, Merab was given to another man. However, Michal, another daughter of Saul, fell in love with David. When he found out, Saul saw a new opportunity. He thought he could use that love to trap him. He sent his servants to secretly persuade him, telling him that the king and his courtiers esteemed him and wanted to see him as a son-in-law. David objected again, acknowledging his poverty and lack of title. Then Saul demanded an unusual dowry, 100 Philistine foreskins, hoping that the mission would cause him to perish on the battlefield. When they told him about the challenge, David gladly accepted it, gathered his men, defeated 200 Philistines, and presented his spoils to the king, doubling the required amount. With this, he won Michal's hand, and in the eyes of all, the blessing of heaven. The evidence was undeniable. The Lord was with David, and the king's own daughter loved him. Saul no longer just felt jealous. Fear turned him into a declared enemy, a feeling that would haunt him for the rest of his days. However, even when the Philistine princes went out to war and the challenges multiplied, David stood out more than any of Saul's other officers. His name was held in even higher esteem throughout Israel, pointing to a destiny that not even the king's envy could stop. The atmosphere in Israel was becoming increasingly tense. Saul, consumed by envy and fear, went so far as to order his own son and his servants to kill David. But Jonathan, whose heart was deeply bound to his friends, secretly warned him and protected him. He spoke to his father, reminding him how David had risked his life to defeat Goliath and bring salvation to all Israel. For a moment, reason touched Saul, and he swore not to kill him. David returned to the palace, but the peace would not last. In the next battle against the Philistines, David once again emerged victorious. His glory grew, and with it the king's torment. One night, while David was playing the harp to calm him, Saul, possessed by an evil spirit, hurled his spear, trying to pin him to the wall. David barely escaped and fled. Saul, determined to finish him, sent guards to his house. But Michal, David's wife, let him down through the window and saved him. To deceive the soldiers, she placed a statue in the bed, covering it with clothes and a pillow of goat's hair at the head. When Saul discovered the ruse, he reproached his daughter. But David was already far away. The young man fled to Ramah and sought refuge with Samuel. There in Naioth he found respite. But Saul pursued him, sending messengers again and again. And something surprising happened. Each group that arrived upon seeing Samuel and the prophets was overcome by the Spirit of God and began to prophesy. This happened 3 times. Finally, Saul himself went and also fell under the power of the Spirit, prophesying while stripped of his garments, all day and all night. That spectacle left everyone with a lingering question. Is Saul also among the prophets? Thus, in the midst of persecutions and escapes, the hand of God continued to confirm that David was under his care, while the king, increasingly lost, could not stop what had already been decreed from above. David, his heart heavy with anguish, ran to seek out Jonathan. Face to face with a trembling voice, he asked, "What have I done? What is my fault that your father seeks my life?" Jonathan tried to calm him, assuring him that nothing would happen without him knowing about it. But David, with the certainty of someone who feels death breathing down his neck, swore that there was only a step between his life and the grave. Then Jonathan, moved, answered him firmly, "Whatever you wish, I will do it for you." They devised a secret plan. David would be absent from the king's table at the new moon feast. If Saul reacted calmly, it would mean there was no danger. But if his anger flared, it would be a sign that evil had been decided. With deep love and loyalty, they renewed their covenant under oath before God. They not only promised to protect each other in life, but also to show mercy to each other's descendants. Jonathan even asked that his name and his family would never be erased from David's memory. The feast arrived. On the first day, Saul noticed David's absence but kept silent, thinking that perhaps he was ceremonially unclean. On the second day, he asked Jonathan directly. His son explained that David had asked to go to Bethlehem for a family sacrifice. Then the king's anger exploded. He insulted his own son and accused him of treason, declaring that as long as David lived, Jonathan's kingdom would never be secure. He demanded that he hand David over so he could be put to death. Jonathan, in a burst of courage, defended his friend. Why must he die? What has he done? Saul, beside himself, hurled a spear at his own son. It was then that Jonathan understood his father was irrevocably determined to kill David. He left the table outraged and wounded, fasting as a sign of grief for the offense done to his friend. At dawn the next day, Jonathan went out to the field with a servant. He shot arrows as if he were practicing, but in reality he was sending the agreed-upon signal. By shouting to the boy that the arrows were beyond, he was telling David that he had to flee. The boy didn't understand, but David did. When the servant left, the two friends embraced, weeping bitterly. David bowed 3 times as a sign of respect, and amid sobs, so did Jonathan. He spoke words of farewell. "Go in peace, for the Lord is between you and me, between your descendants and mine forever." Thus, weighed down by sorrow but upheld by an eternal covenant, the paths of the two friends parted. David heading into the uncertainty of exile. Jonathan returning to the city, his heart torn between loyalty to his father and unwavering love for his soul brother. Hungry, exhausted, and fleeing without direction, David arrived at the priestly city of Nob. There he was received by Ahimelech, who was surprised to see him alone. David cautiously made up a story. He said that the king had sent him on a secret mission and that he had servants waiting for him elsewhere. Pretending urgency, he asked for bread. The priest hesitated. There was no ordinary bread, only the sacred bread of the presence. But upon hearing that David's men had kept themselves pure, he agreed and gave him those holy loaves that had just been replaced on the altar. At that moment, an uncomfortable witness was present. Doeg the Edomite, one of Saul's most influential servants, was silently observing everything. David also asked for weapons, since he had left without any. Ahimelech had only one, Goliath's sword, wrapped behind the ephod as a sacred keepsake. Upon seeing it, memories of the battle in the valley of Elah came rushing back. David smiled with determination. "There's none like it. Give it to me." And with that sword in hand, he continued his escape. But fate led him to a dangerous place. Gath, the land of Goliath under the reign of Achish. As soon as he entered, the king's servants recognized him. "Isn't this David, the one they sang about? Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands." Those words filled him with fear. Discovered in enemy territory, his life hung by a thread. Then, cleverly, he changed his behavior. He pretended to be insane. He banged on the doors, scribbled on them, and let saliva run down his beard like a madman. When he saw him, King Achish became angry and said with disdain, "Do I lack madmen that you bring this one to my house?" Thus, ridiculed but free, David managed to escape the city, taking with him only his faith and his wits, and the sword of the giant who had once fallen by his hand. Pursued, exhausted, and without a permanent place, David took refuge in the cave of Adullam. There he not only found refuge but also unexpected company. His family, fearing for him, came to join him, and after them began to arrive men who were afflicted, in debt, persecuted, and desperate. From that group of outcasts, David became their leader, forming a company of about 400 men who saw in him a leader and a source of hope. Concerned for his parents' safety, he sought protection in Moab and asked the king to keep them safe until God's purpose for his life was fulfilled. But the prophet Gad ordered him to leave that foreign refuge and return to Judah. So David obeyed and went into the forest of Hereth, always guided by the divine hand. Meanwhile, Saul, consumed by paranoia, gathered his servants under a tamarisk tree. With his spear in hand, he accused them of conspiring with David and Jonathan, reproaching them for not having revealed the truth to him. Then Doeg the Edomite spoke up. He himself had seen David in Nob with the priest Ahimelech, who gave him bread and the sword of Goliath. Saul, enraged, ordered Ahimelech and all the priests to be summoned. Before the king, the priest defended David. "Who is more loyal than he is? He is your son-in-law, your servant, and he has always honored your house." But Saul, blinded, pronounced a death sentence on the entire priestly family. The royal guards refused to lay a hand on the men of God. Then Saul ordered Doeg to carry out the massacre, and Doeg obeyed. That day, 85 priests fell by his sword and the city of Nob was destroyed. Neither men, nor women, nor children, nor animals escaped the king's fury. The ground was stained with blood in what became one of the darkest acts of his reign. Only one survived, Abiathar, son of Ahimelech. He fled to David and told him about the tragedy. Upon hearing it, the young leader felt an unbearable weight. "I knew that Doeg would tell. I have caused the death of your father's entire house." But raising his voice firmly, he comforted him. "Stay with me. Do not be afraid. Whoever seeks my life will also seek yours. With me, you will be safe." Thus, in the midst of pain and injustice, the figure of David grew even stronger. A leader of the forsaken, a man pursued but protected by the hand of God. The Philistines were attacking Keilah and plundering its harvests. When David heard the news, he did not act impulsively. He consulted Jehovah. The answer was clear. "Go deliver Keilah." But his men trembled with fear, and David asked once again. The voice of God reaffirmed itself. "Rise up, you will go down, for I will deliver the Philistines into your hands." With that assurance, he marched with his 600 warriors. He defeated the invaders and freed the city. The news soon reached Saul. The king, believing he had David cornered in a walled city, summoned his army to besiege him. David, having been warned, consulted Jehovah again. The answer was harsh. The very men of Keilah would hand him over if Saul arrived. Without delay, David left with his men and began to wander through the deserts and mountains of Ziph. Saul searched for him every day, but God did not deliver him into his hands. In the midst of that persecution, Jonathan found David in the wilderness of Horesh. There, under the trees and far from the crowds, he encouraged him. "Do not be afraid. You will reign over Israel, and I will be second to you. My father knows it." Both renewed their covenant before God. once again sealing a friendship that neither war nor the king's hatred could break. But betrayal was not long in coming. The inhabitants of Ziph went to Saul and revealed where David was hiding. The king blessed them and sent them to make sure of his whereabouts. He then mobilized his army toward Maon. There, on a lonely mountain, the tension became unbearable. Saul was circling on one side with his men while David fled with his own on the other. The noose was tightening. Capture seemed imminent. And then, providentially, a messenger burst in urgently. "King, the Philistines have invaded the land." Saul had no choice. He abandoned the pursuit and marched against the new enemy. That place was called Selah Hamalekoth, the rock of separation, because there God separated David from the hands of Saul. David, still a fugitive, moved to the rugged refuges of Engedi, where the desert caves became his fortress. And so once again, David was delivered from Saul's hands, protected by divine intervention at just the right moment. But what comes next is even more shocking. A face-to-face encounter between the pursued and his pursuer deep within the caves of Engedi. What will David do when he has Saul's life in his hands? Don't miss the next chapter of this story, which continues to reveal God's power, faith, and mercy. Subscribe right now so you don't miss a single detail. Like this video if these words touched your heart, and share it so that more people can learn about this story and the message of hope it contains.